Hi, everyone. Welcome to this evening's weekly notice. This is episode number 7. Sorry for the slight delay. Um, another week has gone by, and it does seem like the world is like on fire, doesn't it? And I always say that kind of every week, but it just uh, I think all of us are kind of shocked at many of the developments that are taking place. Um, So I'll just go right into it. Um, we're still experiencing the consequences of the criminal leak of the draft Supreme Court opinion. And I say criminal because, one, there's an investigation that's been launched. And I see that some people in some of my comments on my social media, particularly my detractors, will say, how's this, how's it criminal? It's whistleblowing. You can't criminalize whistleblowing. Whistleblowing is protective, it's free speech. Actually, there's something called contempt of court. It's for the same reason that when judges don't allow recordings in courtrooms during a trial, and if somebody has an illegal recording and leaks it, that is a crime. This is really no different. There are ongoing deliberations between the judges on a legal matter, and apparently, somebody from within had leaked this draft opinion, and it's my view that it's to place such overwhelming political pressure on the Supreme Court justices that they now have to weigh in the political process, the public feedback, which is not what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to analyze and respond to rulings based on the law. So, okay. So I've been tracking some of there's been more than 7 attacks and vandalisms on churches and pregnancy resource centers. And we're going to see more of this. We saw already so the leak happened on the 2nd of May. And within the hour, there were many people on social media on the mainstream left and the fringe extreme far left calling for direct action um, against the Supreme Court, against the judges. We've already now seen several of the family homes protested by large groups of people. Now, nobody's been violent outside the home, as far as I know, but the U.S. Attorney General has called for more resources so that the U.S. Marshals can provide protections to the Supreme Court justices and their immediate family members. That's very sad that in the United States, the potential threat of violence from the left and far left over an ongoing court legal matter results in judges needing protection. This is something you often see in developing countries and countries where democracy is weak, in Latin America, where judges and prosecutors will get assassinated and killed or threatened with death. Well, we're seeing that in the United States now. And a lot of those calls for violence is actually occurring on Twitter. Yeah. So I'm going to pull up a thread where I've been documenting some of this. And by the way, as always, I keep forgetting to say this. I am keeping track of your questions and comments. So please leave them for me. And in the last segment of the show, I'll get to them. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So what a lot of the far left accounts have been doing, the tacit support of the mainstream left, is basically what this person's doing. So William Gillis, he's an Antifa supporter. He's a very militant, self-described anarchist. And they've been posting addresses of places for their comrades. Now, what William did, as far as I know, doesn't break any Twitter policies because the pregnancy centers that he posted are businesses. So this is it's not like a private residence, for example. But I mean, what happens when you put out addresses in a list with incendiary text, um, like what he did, and in some follow-up tweets, people are going to take direct action. It's a dog whistle to violence, um, and violence has been happening, unfortunately, unsurprisingly. Um, this is from an Antifa account, and this is sort of their adopted mantra now. If abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either. It's a very disturbing threat, actually. Um, Roe v. Wade has nothing to do with abortions being safe or not. What if Roe v. Wade is overturned? What happens is then states, which have a high degree of autonomy and a degree of sovereignty as well, in the United States. There's an international audience part of here, so I try to explain it. But what overturning Roe v. Wade would do is it would turn that decision making back to the states as it was previously. Sometimes when I talk to my European peers or colleagues, they're a bit confused. They read the headlines and they think that Roe v. Wade overturning that would make abortion illegal across the United States, which is untrue. There are a number of states that are overwhelmingly conservative in their legislatures who have said that they would make abortion more restrictive or illegal. But one can make the argument that actually, when it's kicked back to state level, it's actually more democratic. Not that that matters, though, to Antifa and the Militant Violet, who want and demand actually absolutely no restrictions on abortion. And in many places in America, which with very large populations like California, it has some of the most lax abortion laws anywhere in the world. Many Western countries, many European countries in the EU don't even have as relaxed of the laws as it does in many states in the United States. This is from a verified account. So this is from a journalist. Her name's Carolyn Riley. And she wrote in response to the news that a anti-abortion Christian organization in Madison, Wisconsin, was attacked in an arson attack, an attempted firebombing attack. And her response was, "More of this. May these people never know a moment of peace or safety until they rot in the ground." So, and let's see what publication is she's with. Okay, she's a reporter for the Rewire news group. She's calling for more attacks, and she seems to suggest that she wants the attacks to become deadly. May these people never know a moment of peace or safety until they rot in the ground. This type of violent extremism coming from journalists is not surprising to me. A lot of liberal journalists have espoused support for political violence. Most of them are smart enough to not say it directly, as she did, but many of them feel it and think it. And you can see it in many of the meltdowns that have been happening. So I made a thread on Twitter where I go in chronological order with some of the attacks and locations, and I'm adding to it, and I hope that it becomes kind of like a centralized place for people to be able to reference, because you're seeing what's happening here and there, and you can sometimes it kind of all melts together, unfortunately, because there's been so many. But I think one of the first known attacks happened 3rd of May, so the morning after the leak. and this was in Boulder, Colorado. Sacred Heart of Mary Church. It's a Catholic church. It was smashed up and it was vandalized. And look at some of these messages. F the church, F the state, anarchist A symbols. My body, my choice, keep your religion off our bodies. No cages, no borders, free healthcare for all. And red paint was smeared on the face of a saints, I should say. So some of the first violent direct actions that were carried out by groups that have adopted anarchist symbols. And what movement is most infamous for doing that? If you follow my reporting, you would know right away that that's Antifa. These are the symbols that they adopt. On Twitter, many Antifa accounts were hoping for this moment to be 2022's George Floyd moment. And they've had a bit of success in turning some of these protests into riots. I'll get into that a little bit later, but you may recall that in 2020, many of the riots that broke out in Portland and other cities became violent, not just immediately. It happened because there was a larger left-wing protest in support of BLM that became violent by Antifa and those who took effort to incite violence by initiating the window breaking of businesses, which would start the looting. They would set the fires, which would then result in neighborhoods being torched. So they're trying to repeat that, and they're trying to use this abortion issue as this year's George Floyd moment. Antifa in Portland, also on May 3rd, they joined a direct action of a anti-abortion, a pro-abortion protest. And I'm specific with my language. I'm saying pro-abortion because if you watch the videos or you go to the demonstrations, it's explicitly pro-abortion. It's not about being pro-choice. These people give speeches celebrating the fact that they had abortions. They think it's great and should be celebrated, which is a very sick departure from what was the mainstream liberal position a couple of decades ago, which is that we support abortion rights and access, but it should be rare and it should be safe. And that's not what these people are saying. They're saying that abortion is good and it should be celebrated. So Antifa joined the pro-abortion march and carried out violence in broad daylight, as they have done dozens and dozens of times now over the years in Portland. And they came in black bloc. You can see in the picture on the left, smashed up businesses, smashed up City Hall, did it with impunity. And the thing is, it was all announced on Twitter, as the riots in 2020 were. Law enforcement didn't respond, which is what they do in Portland. The police there operate under the philosophy that if police respond, it could escalate, and therefore it's best to stay away. So they've released these photographs you can see on the left here of people in black bloc, and they're asking for the public's help in identifying them. Yeah, good luck. You see all the militants dressed head to toe in black with their faces covered. You really think the public can identify any of these people? I'll play one of the videos. This is just one of many attacks that were carried out. So you see everyone walking by. There's the A symbol from the Antifa with the black umbrella. So they have all these weapons trying to smash up and break their way inside numerous government buildings. They also tried to set the federal courthouse on fire in downtown, the Mock O. Hatfield Courthouse. This is the same courthouse that was under siege in 2020. So they threw incendiary devices, that's according to police. The building didn't catch fire, and the building, by the way, is still fenced off now. By the end of this month, it will be 2 years. Yeah, so downtown Portland is still, in a way, quite under siege. The statues that are toppled are still gone. Most of them will not be put back up. In fact, the elk statue, if you remember that, the elk statue, which was set on fire, and it was a beautiful fountain. The elk statue was set on fire, and then the concrete base around it, what Antifa were doing when they occupied that area outside the courthouses, they brought hammers and tools to chip away at the concrete, and they used those pieces of stone to hurl at police and to hurl at windows and buildings. And so the statue was removed because it was at risk of being toppled over. So yeah, 2 years later, that's one of the most famous statues in Portland is still gone. The city did vote this week. City council voted to put it back up, and that was deemed to be like some big accomplishment. And Antifa have called for it to be set on fire again. Of course they would. So the Boulder, Colorado attack by anarchists, the Portland attack by Antifa, May 3rd. And then on May 5th, Portland again. There was an attack on a pregnancy resource center on Southeast Powell Boulevard. And this is one of the pregnancy centers that Gillis had posted the address of. I showed that screenshot earlier. So, it's just complete destruction of. By the way, for those who aren't familiar with what pregnancy resource centers are, these are places that provide some basic free healthcare to women who are pregnant, and they advise them against getting abortions. They don't call themselves clinics, they don't call themselves hospitals. Their services are pretty basic, and they are very transparent about that. The existence of these pregnancy resource centers anger the left because, again, for them, it's not about pro-choice. It's about being pro-abortion, and the fact that these pregnancy resource centers, which are usually connected to a nonprofit or religious entity like a Catholic institution, or sometimes evangelical ones too, the fact that these exist are intolerable to the far left, and they want to see them destroyed. So they do things like what happened here in Portland. I've driven by the center many times. It's right in the middle of the city. And in fact, I'm surprised that it hasn't been targeted before. Unfortunately, it's only a matter of time that they would suffer this type of fate, which is thousands of dollars in damages, and then time it takes to repair. And then what Antifa would do is they'll just go back and break all the windows the next time. So which is why many of the windows of the businesses in downtown remain closed or boarded up. And what it does to a city is it makes the city look destitute. It makes the businesses look closed. People just stop coming. Also on the 5th of May, this time is in Michigan, in a small town, Armada. This is a Catholic church that was targeted with satanic symbols and messages. 666. Someone they wrote "gay" on the church. It's a church, and it's also a Catholic school, by the way. Upside down cross. Yeah, suicide. Big. Yeah, you can read it. And there was also some graffiti calling for the death of Republicans. So then on the 7th of May, this is in Colorado again, Fort Collins. So St. John the 23rd Catholic Church, it was smashed up, and there were, look at that, a anarchist symbol again. My body, my choice. The claim of responsibility was published on Abolition Media, which is a far left anarchist blog. They have a Twitter account that publishes these claims of responsibilities from violent extremist groups. So they're the ones who posted this in this photo. And this is a claim of responsibility. I'll just read it. It's very simple. Colorado anarchists visited the St. John the 23rd Catholic Church of Fort Collins last night, leaving multiple broken windows and painted messages in retaliation for its material support of dangerous anti-abortion groups like 40 Days for Life. These groups have terrorized local visitors of Planned Parenthood for years now and must not be tolerated. Solidarity, received by email. And they call these communiques, by the way, which is French for a communication. So you notice with a lot of these radical far left ideologues that they will appropriate French words or sometimes Spanish and Italian because I guess it makes them seem like cool and radical, and it works for the simple-minded. You'll see a little bit of this with the trans ideology as well. Like the women they won't say they're woman, they'll say they're femme, right? Which just means woman in French. And the attacks keep going on. So Denton, Texas now, on 7th of May, this was a pregnancy resource center connected to a Catholic nonprofit, and it was vandalized messages in support of abortion. So you see a lot of the attacks have been concentrated like in the Portland area or in Seattle, but also in red states like Texas, so it's just because you're pro-life in a red state doesn't mean you're safe. And this is the most violent one that happened now on the 8th of May, Madison, Wisconsin. So this is the Wisconsin Family Action. So they were targeted in an arson attack. The windows were smashed out. A fire was started. Fortunately, the building didn't burn down, but the office was ruined. Molotov cocktails were thrown, according to law enforcement, but they failed to explode, or maybe they exploded but were extinguished quickly on their own. So, yeah, these are, and they left messages, this group. If abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either. And look at that. BA. 1312. 1312 is a dog whistle that Antifa and far left militant extremist groups and individuals use. It stands for, it's a numeric rendering of ACAB. So, which is all cops are bastards. So it's an anti-law enforcement message. And this domestic terrorist attack, how it was covered by the New York Times and many publications, and the reaction from the mainstream left is that it was a false flag attack by the right, that it was fake. And you see this type of reaction a lot actually on the mainstream left. They don't believe that, they don't want the public to believe that their side is capable of violent extremism. And for a time, I thought it was because they truly didn't believe their side could be violent, but it's more about deception. Obviously, they know that all the hallmarks of this attack is that it's genuine. They responded in a similar way. For example, when I was beaten in 2019 and I was hospitalized, and I gave BuzzFeed, which was no friend to me, my hospital records about the diagnosis of the brain hemorrhage, a traumatic brain injury, that I nearly died. And yet the mainstream public felt very confident in saying that I faked the attack, that I hired people, that I faked my brain injury, that it was just milkshakes. They know they're lying. So here, they know they're lying when they say that this is some far-right attack pretending to blame left-wing people. The investigation is still ongoing. I can tell you, though, as somebody who writes full-time and researches full-time about far-left extremist groups in the United States, everything here looks real. And of course, I mean, that's pretty much confirmed when a far-left group linked to, well, there's an Antifa link here, unsurprisingly. So a few days ago, a far-left group claimed responsibility attack, and I'll read from the statement because it's chilling. The statement was sent to a Antifa writer who either lived in Portland or lives there, Robert Evans. I've had unfortunate dealings with him. He does writing for Bellingcat, but he himself is somebody who supports violent extremism, and I've documented this on my Twitter. He praised, for example, the arson attack on a police station at a Antifa riot in 2020. Praised it in very unequivocal words. He tried to delete that evidence. Fortunately, I have it archived and backed up. He falsely said that I lied about having to leave Portland, that I did that for money. That was lies. So very not a serious journalist, and has connections and links to the militant far left, which is how they trusted him enough to send him their statement to be published. And here, so it says first communique, again using the French word. This is not a declaration of war. War has been upon us for decades, a war which we did not want and did not provoke. Interesting, right? They put out right away that they're not the ones provoking any violence. And this is the militant far left way of explaining away their violence. Anything they do is just self-defense in reaction to some other thing that they've been wronged for. So when they throw the first punch, when they fire a gun, when they stab somebody, when they try to gouge out somebody's eyes, when they try to burn down an office and set fire to it, that's not them provoking anything. That's just them responding in self-defense. And it goes on, this was only a warning. We demand the disbanding of all anti-choice establishments, fake clinics, and violent anti-choice groups within the next 30 days. This is not a mere difference of opinion as some have framed it. We are literally fighting for our lives. We will not sit still while we are killed and forced into servitude. We have run thin on patience and mercy for those who seek to strip us of what little autonomy we have left. As you continue to bomb clinics and assassinate doctors with impunity, so too shall we adopt increasingly extreme tactics to maintain freedom over our own bodies. This is such bullshit. The bombing of clinics that happened rarely in the United States in the 90s led to the prosecution, conviction, and long sentencing of those anti-abortion extremists. So I don't know what this is a lie when it says it's done with impunity. In fact, the federal agencies in the United States have taken anti-abortion violent extremism extremely serious, and laws have been passed to protect those who seek abortions. When there was a time in the 90s where many of these clinics were so heavily protested that you couldn't even go in. So yeah, this is propaganda. That's what, it's not about. It's about coming up with excuses to justify one's own violent extremism, which is what this group did, called Jane's Revenge. I'm continuing. Again, this was only a warning. Next time, the infrastructure of the enslavers will not survive. Medical imperialism will not face a passive enemy. Wisconsin is the first flashpoint, but we are all over the US, and we will issue no further warnings. We will not stop, we will not back down, nor will we hesitate to strike until the inalienable right to manage our own health is returned to us. We are not one group, but many. We are in your city, we're in every city. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a statement from terrorist group. It's wanting the public to be afraid. It's wanting civilians to be afraid. And some of the language here, this was only a warning. We have run thin on patience and mercy. And they're giving a demand, an ultimatum of 30 days. Otherwise, the suggestion here is there's going to be some escalation of violence on their end. Yeah. So law enforcement, by the way, in Wisconsin is aware of this. So they have said that they have involved now the federal law enforcement to help them investigate this. Yeah, I'll continue to keep track of this because it has the signs of Antifa all over it. And certainly it's been amplified by Antifa, this type of violence and celebration of violence. And that wasn't the only attack. In Oregon, again, back to Oregon on May 8th, this is in Kaiser, Oregon, which is a small city. Vandals tried to smash their way into the Oregon Right to Life office. They were unable to break the windows, but they hurled 2 firebombs at the building, and it's a stone building, so the flames didn't spread, fortunately. And this is in Houston, Texas. More graffiti on a Catholic church, Holy Rosary Church. So I just want to say that sometimes my detractors make a caricature out of me. They think I'm some far right Christian extremist. It's untrue, obviously. Not that matters to them, but abortion is a topic I never discussed before, really, until now. And I think my personal views on it as a political, moral matter is not really relevant. What's relevant to me here is that there are far left extremists who are threatening violence and have carried out violence because they disagree with a legal court procedure. A ruling hasn't even been made, but they're using threats of violence against. So yes, they're targeting the justices. They're targeting the Supreme Court. Some heavy-duty fencing has gone around the Supreme Court to protect it, but they're also going after people and groups that have nothing to do with the Supreme Court opinion. These Catholic churches, cathedrals, and pregnancy resource centers have nothing to do with the Supreme Court justices and their deliberations that are going on. So extremists are targeting civilians and trying to create an environment where people feel fearful for their religious beliefs. Obviously, Antifa have already made people afraid for having certain political views, such as support for Donald Trump or various conservative views. But now they want people who go to church to be afraid in their church. I'm going to play a video out of what happened at the cathedral in Seattle this past Sunday. So some of the targeting of the churches that have happened during Mass, during communion. And it's not facing widespread condemnation as it should. It really is a disgusting thing to go into houses of worship and to target people while they're engaging in acts of worship or other religious activities. And I say that really for any religion. the left, for example, have condemned protests at mosques that have links to terrorists. You know, the left will call that Islamophobia. And these are just protests outside the mosque, whereas those on their side will go inside the cathedral or try to go inside and try to disrupt what are sacred moments for these worshippers. Okay. Oh, and by the way, for those who have joined late, please leave questions or comments, and I'll get to it soon. So yeah, this video is out of Seattle, and it was a group of pro-abortion, pro-choice activists who were trying to get inside, or at least closer to the cathedral, which had a mass that was ongoing on Sunday. And the cathedral, unfortunately, has had to hire their own private security to protect the place. You can just see what happens, and pay attention to the language that is used.
These Christian fascists.
Louisiana, you mix that Negro with that Creole.
Did you hear them say, these people, these Christian fascists? So this wasn't an Antifa group that was protesting, but they're adopting the language of Antifa, which is to call any of their opponents fascists. And Catholics going to Mass on Sunday is not an act of fascism, but to these people it is. So pay attention to that.
This is private property. You need to go down the sidewalk.
Larry Rouse, take the country out. I got hot sauce in my bag. That's why we're here saying abortion on demand and without apology. We will not get off. And we're going to do it back and demonstrate. Come on. Dude, he touched my phone.
No!
What the fuck is wrong with you?
Back
You
up!
fucking predator. Why would you push her? Pedophile! What the fuck is wrong with you? Oh, look at him with his mace out. Even though he has a patch that says something about a love, he's got a fucking Bible verse as he pushed an elderly woman down the stairs, but he's trying to act like he's got a Bible verse? You biggest fucking hypocrite in the fucking world. You're a piece of shit. Disgusting. And you have a Bible verse? Yeah, look at him laughing like it's funny. He enjoys pushing elderly women down the stairs. If she gets injured, you're fucked. You're fucked. We're gonna go to the hospital, and if she's hurt, you're fucked for assault. What's his name? I need his name. I need his name because he just physically pushed me down the stairs. No, you won't. That's what I need his name to report him to someone who will care. You'll take him to jail. He just pushed her down the stairs. I don't
like me? Come and say hello to me right here, bitch.
Down the stairs and hurt her. He needs to get arrested. Arrest him. Arrest him.
Yeah. Okay. It goes on. You get the idea. So there was a moment where they ignored the commands to get off the private property and were trying to make their ways to the doors of the cathedral, which had a mass going on inside. And they were stopped by private security. One of the women grabbed the arm of the security, and he apparently pushed her back, and she fell down a few steps. And it really angered the group, and they were threatening this, threatening that, threatening to dox him, saying they're going to press charges and get him arrested, etc. Unfortunately, that wasn't the only attack that day on a cathedral. There was also an attack, not an attack, sorry, wrong word. There was a protest the same day that was trying to shut down communion in Los Angeles. I'm going to pull up the video. One moment. Okay. So this is at the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels. Angels. This is in Los Angeles, and there's a group of protesters who came in dressed normally, and they were taking advantage of the kindness that they were offered by this cathedral. They came in, they had backpacks with them, and within the backpacks were various props that they later took out. And so when they began to try to carry out their direct action, it was to shut down communion. And if you're a Catholic, that's one of the sacraments. So you understand that's extremely important to the religion. It's not just, a disruption in the church. You're disrupting a sacrament, trying to shut it down. Just watch the video.
Hey, you get off of him. You're not attacking anybody.
You're attacking me right now. You started attacking me.
No, you're going towards our preacher.
All of these people walking
Go towards our preacher. Get out of it. It's not. You turn it into something else. You have to keep you away from the preacher. You have to keep you away from the preacher. You've got to get away from respecting women. You want to come in and attack. Respect us. Respect us.
You want to respect us? As you guys want respect, we want respect too. I understand that.
Get out of here. Get out of here. You're disrespectful. You know what?
I understand. Listen, I understand. We are with you. But please let us more respect.
This is so disrespectful. Wow.
Please.
It's such a falsehood. You even practice Christian things when you're out there.
Mga ano yan, leftist. Kasi di ba?
You can't attack our princess. All the permits have been filled this.
I have a right to my choice.
Get out of here!
So they continue to scream and make a big scene. They're pushed out by the parishioners and the security. There was no violence, and they're wearing the mock Handmaid's Tale costumes. If you, a number of women since Trump was elected have taken on to wearing that costume at protests to try to say that life in America now is akin to that dystopian novel that was written in which women were essentially sex slaves of men, and that was the uniform that they had to wear to cover up their bodies, and the head bonnet thing was to obscure their face and their vision. It's interesting that these actors say that America is like that when I believe the author of the novel based that misogynist dystopia off of various Islamic societies where they do have life that is a variation of that in some extremes. Taliban, for example, which, by the way, just last week issued a decree that women will have to wear a face and a face covering again. They had already had to wear hijab. That's something that the Taliban implemented immediately when they retook control of Afghanistan. But now they say the women will have to cover their faces. In Afghanistan, the burqa, that's the most extreme form of veiling in Islam, because it's the garment where it goes over your entire body from the top and from the eyes. You don't even have a slit for the eyes. You actually have a mesh. So from the outside, you can't even see the eyes of the woman that is covered. It's literally wearing a bag. And yeah, so Anyways, very despicable acts from these pro-choice protesters to target religious institutions and houses of worship that have nothing to do with what the Supreme Court justices are deliberating on in a legal matter. Okay. If you, I'm going to get to some of the questions and comments now. Please send them in. You can still send in some, and I'll take a look. Oh, wait, before I get to that, I just want to play something unrelated to the abortion stuff that I've been talking about. So in the UK, the Channel 4, which is one of the major television channels, they are famous for producing documentaries. They produce now another one. There's kind of on the far right, and there's an endless number of these. And some of them are interesting. In this one, they had one of their journalists infiltrate a far right group called Patriotic Alternative, which is a British far right group, and they had their journalists go undercover, and well, some of the activities that this group does is homeschooling and leafleting in neighborhoods, which Channel 4 says is well, the name of the documentary is called "The Enemy Within the Far Right." So during this undercover infiltration, the journalist got jumped by Antifa, was beaten in the ambush. Yeah, so you can find the documentary on Channel 4. It premiered earlier this week. It's quite interesting. He goes undercover in a far right group and is jumped by Antifa. And I haven't watched the documentary, but from the activities I've seen from the descriptions, they're engaging in legal activities. Leafleting is legal. Homeschooling is legal in England. And so, but assaulting and beating people is not legal. But that's one of the main MOs of Antifa, which is to carry out violence against people whose political views they disagree with, essentially. For people who care about liberty, it shouldn't matter what those views are. Nobody should be subjected to violence for wrong think or for their thoughts. And Antifa wants to create a world, an environment where if you have the wrong ideas, you should be killed. Okay, some of the questions. Where's the DHS on these terrorists? And it's referencing the various targeting of the churches and the pregnancy centers. Well, the FBI for sure is getting involved, has gotten involved with some of the firebombing attacks, particularly out of Madison. And that's, the police department there has said that they've reached out to federal law enforcement. So that would be the FBI. But regarding some of these other things like the spray paint and such, I don't think the FBI will get involved. They probably don't care. Whereas, if it was some racist graffiti or something, or anti-Semitic graffiti out of a mosque, out of a synagogue, I think, for it to happen so frequently within a period of a few days across the country, I think there would be some public statement probably from a federal agency. But it's not fashionable or politically convenient to stand up for religious conservatives. So yeah, you're not going to see much movement in that direction. It's unfortunate. Maybe I'm being a bit cynical. That's my perception of how law enforcement works in the United States. You can do much more if you're perceived to be on the political left. Peasant Zero asks, wouldn't it be easy to trace the known Antifa members to local social justice organizations? It can be easy if you can identify the Antifa members, and good luck on that. If they are Antifa members who are part of the cell, they have already gone through operation security training. So they know, for example, how to hide their ability to be traced in their communications. Every communication is through encryption, hiding their IP address, using different browser applications where it doesn't even track like who you are at all. There's one called Tor that does that. They use their own email servers as well. So yeah, it's not easy, and law enforcement don't really care to break apart some of these cells. It's seen as a lower priority for them. Low priority, no priority. Sydney Salmer asks, is Andy still forced to live outside the US for his safety? I don't really talk about security stuff for security reasons, as you can understand. I will say, as I've said on record before, that I had to leave Portland because of threats on my life. And the United States is generally not a safe place for me to be, particularly in cities where Democrat politicians don't take far less violent extremism seriously. And death threats against a journalist like me, or attempted assaults, or promises of assault, or promises of violence are not seen as worthy of a response. So that's all I'll say about that. Okay. UK Monkey asks, when will the law apply to the left? I understand the question is being facetious in a way, but I'll answer it seriously. So the reason why culture matters a lot in politics is because of what is now banality. But it was a statement that was coined by Andrew Breitbart, I believe, but expressed by other thinkers as well, which is that politics is downstream from culture. So if you create a culture where the left has dominance in institutions, in pop culture, in entertainment, in journalism, in education, in local jurisdictions, in the federal government, and they get to set the boundaries of what is acceptable and is not acceptable. And that matters a lot, because then, for example, the 6th of January, the riot on that day is now they're able to say, and their message is amplified by the liberal media apparatus, they're able to set the record, or create a record, I should say, that the 6th of January is worse than 9/11, worse than Pearl Harbor, and one of the darkest days in all of American history. Whereas months of deadly violence that were carried out in 2020 by BLM, the left, Antifa, and other opportunist rioters, that was seen as a great moment of reckoning of racial justice in America. You control the culture, you have dominance of the culture, you can control politics. Okay. And you can still send some questions or comments, by the way. I'm going to talk about some other news. This one is has a personal connection to me. Okay. So it was reported, it was revealed, I should say, earlier this week that a suspect had been apprehended in the attempted arson of a mosque in Portland, and and he's now been accused of carrying out attacks on synagogues in Portland. This had happened all this month, so recently in the past 2 weeks. And it sparked obviously a big scare in Portland for the minority Jewish community and for Muslims. And the person who is charged with multiple felonies is a journalist who has his beat was to cover the alt-right, the far right, and the right. And his name is Mike Bivens. That's a photo of him there at his arraignment. I knew Mike Bivens from our time in student media at Portland State. We were editors for 2 different publications at Portland State, and we were acquaintances. Mike was one of the first Portland journalists through social media who went viral. Him and I covered many of the same riots, not together. We had very different work styles and different philosophies as well. I knew him for years as somebody who was left libertarian, but relatively apolitical. But he had a very strong dislike of the right. And I remember, I think the last time I saw him in person was 2019. It was, I believe, May Day. It was outside Cider Riot when I was attacked that day with pepper spray by Antifa. I think that was the last time I saw him. And I remember I asked him because of he did writing for the liberal papers in Portland. He also wrote for Al Jazeera about the threat of the right. And I asked him, for him, is there a difference between the far right and the right? I remember asking him that we were walking on a bridge. And he didn't really have an answer. He just said, well, one's more right than the other. And I asked him, like, how? What do you mean? And he didn't really have an answer. And so fast forward now, that was 2019, May of 2019. Years later, I found out now he's accused of all these horrible hate crime vandalisms. It's truly shocking, and it's actually really shocked the Portland media establishment because, I mean, he was on their side. He was one of them. So now you see in a lot of the reporting, this is a former Portland journalist. The journalists who had bylines with him have all distanced themselves, released statements like, oh, yes, we had a byline together in a report, but I didn't work with him. It was just edited together. So Bivens did a lot of reporting for Willamette Week, which is a newspaper, a liberal newspaper in Portland. His work has been featured in a lot of places. A lot of places bought his footage and showed it. He was excellent at capturing the protests, the riots, the brawls that involved Antifa and various right-wing groups. So it's this is truly shocking. I don't think it's a hoax, by the way, in terms of that he was carrying out fake hate crimes in order to frame the right. If you look on his Twitter social media, I don't even recognize him before. Granted, we haven't spoken in years. So last time we had any communication, he sent me a DM in 2020 at the height of the riots, of the Antifa riots, and he wasn't happy that I was posting the mugshots. That was the last time I heard from him. So this is a sad development. And he was, we had different views on things, but he was a decent guy. I don't know what happened to him. I see some rumors that I haven't been able to confirm that he had some personal family stuff go on that was apparently very, very difficult for him. I don't know. And I read in one of the reports that he apparently lost one of his jobs and was homeless or something. So, yeah, I don't know. But that's a story out of Portland that's got a lot of attention. Whew, okay. Well, I've gotten now to the end of my show, and I just want to thank you all again for joining. If you want to support me, if you could support me, please, I'm asking. This is my linked for my link tree, which is just linktree / Andy NGO, and you can find all the ways you can support me. I have a locals, I have a Patreon, Subscribe Star, and my Cash App and Venmo is at Mr. ANDYNGOs. And you can find information about my ongoing lawsuit against some of the Antifa attackers. You can find information about my book. So thank you, everyone, again, for joining, for sending me your questions. Let's see. I'm looking at... there's one more question. I'll end on this. Pioneer 473 asks, you seem like such a gentle person. How did you get involved in chasing Antifa? Well, thank you for the question. Thank you for describing me as gentle. I am a very passive person. Too passive, too kind, I think. All my life, I've been bullied a lot in school. Professionally, I've been bullied by other peers who work in the industry. And then, I mean, you can see many of what they say to me and write about me over the years. So I've always kind of had trouble sticking up for myself just because I'm quite shy and not somebody with like a lot of, I could work on my confidence. I'll just be very honest. Being a public figure at times is very hard for me. But how did I get involved in chasing Antifa? It comes down to a desire for the truth to be known. And I care a lot about the country that welcomed my parents to become equal citizens. And I know maybe it sounds a little bit like a cliche, but I have a lot of gratitude towards it. And I would like to see it preserved for future generations, even if I don't have children. And not just preserved in terms of the land being there, but the traditions, the history, the culture. I think it's come under such systematic attack through violence and through other institutional attacks by those on the far left. And what they're doing is not really being well exposed. In fact, there's a lot of powerful people and institutions who are covering for them or excusing it. And so that's a driving point for why I do reporting on Antifa. Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining. Apologies for the late start. And I'll see you next week.